What's up, everybody? Welcome back to TBL Scope. Today, we are going to be talking about how everything in sports is falling apart as we speak, starting with the MLB testing, which was in complete shambles. The A's, the Astros, the Angels, all of these teams are having to cancel practices because they didn't get test results that were taken on Friday. We're here on Monday. Liam, I got to get your point of view on this whole thing. What's going on in MLB?
I mean, it's a disaster, Brian. It is an absolute disaster. It's almost incomprehensible how they could screw this up. The reports are suggesting that things got weird because of the holiday weekend, but it's not like the holiday weekend came up out of nowhere. Everybody knew what this was happening. And, obviously you figure MLB knows the importance of tests, but if you're talking about if you're power ranking the importance of tests here, the first round of testing is potentially the most important to nail with no complications. And not only are there complications, teams are getting screwed over by just these tests just disappearing or staying in one place for several days at a time. It's inexplicable. They had so much time to figure this out. We all know that. We've all talked a lot about that. Even on TBL Scope, we talked about how long it took them to figure this out. And when they finally start actually getting the ball rolling and getting the season restarted, getting the season started up, having baseball back, they screw up the testing, which you would think would be their number one priority, and they somehow didn't nail that. So it's not a great sign at all. Obviously, since it was the first time, there were going to be some errors, I think, almost inevitably. But now they at least know that they got to really figure it out in the next couple of weeks here, because that's what happened is unacceptable. They can't have baseball with this kind of inconsistent testing and having tests take days to come back when it would only take so many days because of what sounds like logistical issues.
That it happened on 4th of July weekend was so MLB, I can't even stand it. They were supposed to be playing this weekend, and instead, because of all the back and forth, which Rob Manfred basically admitted there was always going to be a 60-game season, but for whatever reason, they delayed it this long. It was just so poetic to me that this happened over that weekend because they missed that big opportunity. But, at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is their system seems to have this major flaw. None of the tests disappeared, but they're not getting sent to the testing facility, right? Which doesn't make any sense to me because that's just logistics, right? You need to dot your I's and cross your T's, and those types of things really can't happen. The Angels didn't even have somebody to administer the tests. Again, that's just a logistical thing that MLB should have had buttoned up. And it's really disappointing, especially from a player and manager perspective. You guys have gone through all of this. You've decided to put yourself into this group setting, but now you aren't getting these tests back in a timely manner, and that really puts you at risk. And I think that's the thing that really stood out to me was without rapid testing. And I'm not saying that MLB won't have rapid testing, but the fact that it has taken 4 days now, this would be day 4 since they took their test, and they don't have the results, that doesn't bode well for the future. Again, understanding holiday weekend, to your point, it's a holiday that was there. They knew it was going to happen. So if it was on Friday, you got to get that overnighted, and you should have those results back. Obviously, it puts these teams at a competitive disadvantage because they were supposed to start full team workouts. They're not allowed to do that because you have to have the testing results back and to isolate the people who do have it. So, and I also thought it really doesn't bode well when you look at the rest of sports. The NFL were literally a month away, less than a month away at this point from when preseason is supposed to start for them. Haven't heard much about, what's going on there. College football, you're hearing about USC now canceling fall classes, which to me essentially makes fall football at USC at least a big college when it comes to football powerhouses. It makes it irrelevant. So USC isn't going to have fall football as far as I can tell. And it just, the whole thing kind of puts this cloud over sports in general. I want to start it off with the NFL. From your perspective, where are we there and what needs to happen in order for that season to actually kick off on time?
Well, they need to start getting some things really set in stone here. Albert Breer over at Sports Illustrated published his Monday morning quarterback column this morning, and all the stuff he had, there was a call on Friday with the players in the union, and the players were asking very specifically, what exactly are testing protocols going to look like? What is this going to look like? What is that going to look like? And the union was unable to give them anything really, really solid. And Breer told a story about how a couple weeks ago, a head trainer had asked a head coach kind of if he had any idea of what kind of the general skeleton structure would look like for trying to put on preseason practices and games. with COVID testing going on, and neither of them had any idea. And that was 2 or 3 weeks ago, so that was just a little over a month. Now we're 3 weeks out from when I think it's the Chiefs and the Texans are supposed to report to training camp, and they don't have anything really, which isn't great. Obviously, you have to assume the union and the league has been working and they have some, like, at least some general ideas worked out here. But if you're a player and you're, it kind of goes back to the MLB thing. If you're a player and you're putting your trust in not only your teammates and everybody around you to make sure you stay safe, but also the larger institution of the league that you work for, and they aren't putting if it doesn't appear that they're putting their best foot forward, it's really hard to I would imagine it'd be very hard to mentally justify going forward with the whole thing. So, I mean, the first step would be just any sort of protocol. I think obviously, like I'm saying, I don't think they don't have anything worked out yet. But the NBA, I think it was about 3 weeks to when the bubble was supposed to start, that they sent a 100-plus page document to their players explaining exactly what the situation was going to be in terms of that bubble and in terms of testing and what rules the players are expected to adhere to. So even just something as general as saying, this is when these teams are going to report, we're going to have testing these many days, would be a great first step towards that. But like you said, I mean, if MLB can't really get it together, then it doesn't, nothing in the news over the past month has given any sort of level of optimism for having the validity of a sports seasons in the fall. But especially when these multi-billion-dollar organizations with all of the resources at their disposal are unable to really be able to say definitively this is what they're going to do and then do it, is not encouraging at all.
Yeah, I think in the NFL's defense, they have been waiting because it's an evolving process, right? We don't know what's happening right now. Testing could be much better in 3 weeks from now than it is today. So I would say that in the NFL's defense, I think they're waiting until kind of like that last moment. They don't want to have what happened with the NBA, right? The NBA did release that, and it was great. And somebody read it. I did not read the whole thing. I did listen. Michael Kay gave me the rundown on New York radio about what was on that for basketball. But I think the NFL is going to play their cards really close to the vest, because that came out and then all of a sudden there was all these issues, right? And can Florida even be the host, the host state for it, given the explosion there in cases. So, I think the NFL is trying to wait it out as much as they can. But yeah, I mean, listen, as a human, that's very disconcerting to me, not knowing what the protocol is going to be. And, but these guys they're trained in a different way, right? They're out there, like, their mind is kind of very different than the way we think. They're out there training. They're out there doing their thing. How often do they think about, like, actually going to training camp? I don't imagine that it's like that much on the forefront of their mind. I could be wrong about that. Of course, I haven't talked to players and, they haven't told me anything about that. But, from my perspective, I think they're probably training the way they normally would. I think the ironic thing for the NFL is that the NFL league offices, this is like a downtime for them usually. July is like the month where nothing's really happening. June, July is like when not that much is happening, right? You got some mini camps at the beginning of June, but like this is the period where they're supposed to have their downtime. And meanwhile, they're like scrambling to figure out, as all leagues are, scrambling to figure out what's the best process that we can put in place to ensure the safety of our players and our coaches and everybody else who's associated with the teams. So it's kind of an interesting place for them. Going to college football, I think it's actually an easier call. I've said from the beginning that they should just move it to spring. That way, I mean, hopefully, when Fauci's saying that there's going to be potentially a vaccine at the end of this year, beginning of 2021, that to me means that, spring 2021, it should at least hopefully be available at, a heavy enough distribution that you start getting students the vaccine, you get the student athletes the vaccine, and then all of a sudden you can have college football like regular. I guess I do get it because there's money involved, and now you have to move all the money back, and then your spring is going to be overloaded, and then you have to go right into fall. So I get it from that perspective, but like, to me, college football is not kicking off on time. It's not going to look like what college football is, and people should. You don't want to say start accepting that, because we do have a couple more months until, month and a half until college football is supposed to kick off. But at the same time, I think it behooves the NCAA to just come in right now and say there's not going to be any fall sports, short of a widely distributed vaccine being brought up out of nowhere.
Yeah, I really think that's the only legitimate option they have, because unlike with the professional sports, the people who are being put at risk aren't very well compensated professional athletes. These are kids. They're a bunch of college athletes, and they have a lot of money riding on their shoulders for their schools and their institutions. And I'm sure that they want to play just as badly as any other athlete in the country wants to play a sport right now. But it's not just the college football team. It's everybody the college football team interacts with. And with the numbers that we're at right now, as far as the COVID cases across the country, there's no reason to think that things will even balance out a little bit by the time college football is supposed to start. Now, things can change very quickly. But when you're talking about how many people and how much is really at stake for the NCAA, I mean, it might be like in terms of dollars and cents less money than what's at stake for MLB, NFL, NBA. But when you're just taking into like the amount of people who are being affected by it, the NCAA has thousands of schools and millions of people under their umbrella. What they choose to do here is going to make a gigantic difference in terms of pretty much everything when the fall comes around, in terms of the sports scene and in terms of just generally what schools are going to be doing with their students when school's supposed to start up again in the fall. So pushing it back to spring, even if so optimistically, ideally, there's a vaccine. But even if there's not, there is reason to hope that, 8-9 months out from now, we're going to have a little bit more of a grasp on things that will have, in terms of the overall impact across the country, things would have improved. And so I just think it's the only answer. You have to push it back because there's just too much at stake right now in terms of people's lives, really. And
even without a vaccine, though, by the way, just some sort of treatment, just like a treatment so that, if you get it, it's not gonna kill you the way it has so many other people.
Yeah, just make it a little bit, just any sort of general improvement at all really would be nice. And there's reason, to think that would be the case in February or March. I think really the only thing the NCAA would be worried about, other than moving the money back and like the complications that are going to come along with that, is that I think Paul Feinbaum mentioned it back in March even. If the football season's in the spring, then why, or any of the sports really, and why, or what incentive do the best prospects have to play? They don't really have any at all. But other than that pales in comparison to the complications and implications that are around the situation at large.
It's a great point, but it's not just about, we can't make this just about the Trevor Lawrences and Justin Fields of the world, right? We've got to understand that, this is about more than just a couple people. And I get that, Clemson wouldn't be nearly as entertaining to watch if Trevor Lawrence wasn't lining up under center. But I think for him, okay, great. You don't have to play in it. I actually don't think college football as much is built around the stars. I think it's built around the rivalries. I think it's built around the team. Even if you did a spring season, you'd probably play a fewer games because you're not going to like have a West Coast team coming out to get trounced by, Alabama in week 2 of the regular season. I think that they can even lean into that even more and have some sort of regional rivalry game. Whether it's, Miami playing Florida and Florida State in back-to-back weeks or something like that. Like, lean into that. Don't make these kids travel as far. Maybe don't take as big of a team. You have 90 people on college football. 90 people don't need to suit up every single week. So from my perspective, I think I understand the point. Like, Justin Fields not playing would be a bummer for Ohio State fans if he's protecting himself for the NFL draft. But at the same time, Ohio State is the team. It's not like, Cardale Jones, like, it's not like their team lost anything when he went to the NFL draft. They were fine the next year. They didn't win the national championship, but, all the same, they were fine. So, from my perspective, I get that element, but I would just like to say that I think for college football, it's easier to just say, this is about the teams. Let's lean into the rivalries. Let's have a little bit more of a conversation around that and less around the star players who are sitting out. Quite frankly, it also brings up fun debate topics. So that's something else you can consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, the college football, more than any other sport, is about your team and your program more than the individual players. And if we're talking, ratings and viewers, I don't think that, Trevor Lawrence sitting out or Justin Fields sitting out would actually make a substantial enough impact that the NCAA should balk at the idea of moving the season that would result in that. People are going to watch the games because they're Clemson and Ohio State fans. I'm sure there are plenty of Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields specific fans out there, and it would be, like you said, a bummer. But in terms of the overall impact, it's not that, I don't think it would be terribly severe. and then compared to the other benefits that are going to come along and the other positive things that would come along with moving the college football season back in terms of general health, from a general health standpoint, I think it's an easy call. But if anything, we know that the NCAA really hates change. So I'm going to try to, I'll believe it when I see it, but I think that's the right call.
Quickly, power rank the most dysfunctional when it comes to the COVID testing leagues out there, including the NCAA.
MLB, NCAA, because the NCAA refused to put in strict COVID testing guidelines for every team. They're leaving it up to each program, which is an awful idea, objectively speaking. Then the NFL, and then the NBA. I mean, that's not really a compliment towards the NBA. It's really just they're the ones who have goofed it the least at this point. And then I guess maybe you could slot in the NHL and NBA tied because they have at least the situation set up. Maybe NHL slightly below because they're doing 2 different bubble cities, which just doubly complicates things. But otherwise, I think that's a pretty good power ranking.
I'm going MLS number 1. That thing seems like a complete disaster. MLB should be 1A, but they'll be number 2 for the purpose of this. I'm going to put the college NCAA there, but I'm going to put NBA above NFL because we don't know enough about the NFL yet. So NFL is sitting in the wings, waiting for its moment to shine in these power rankings. I think they're going to be okay, but we'll see. Either way, this was a lot of fun. Thank you all for joining us once again. For Liam and Brian, signing off.